so much controversy surrounding the Snow White movie, particularly around Rachel Zegler, the actress who's starring in the movie. How is Disney going to recover its image? Hi everyone, Alexandra here. I'm a visibility strategist, communications expert, was a publicist for many years, and I've been covering news, celebrities, pop culture from a branding, publicist, visibility perspective. And I gotta be honest, I'm just getting up to speed on this. I was not following this movie at all. I wasn't following way back from 2021 when Rachel Zegler was cast as Snow White and all of the drama that has ensued. Just peripherally, I've been kind of following it peripherally. But really, now that the movie has been out 2 weekends and is basically flopped, considering the amount of money that went into the movie. So let's dive in. Let's learn a little bit more about what these controversies are, how Disney might be able to recover this. Is it even possible? Do they need to have a new strategy? What can Disney do? Particularly, how can it manage this PR nightmare? Okay, so the first thing I wanted to alert you to is the IMDb as of today. And first of all, I think it's really interesting that they've got this interactive ad on the Snow White page. Kind of cool. I haven't really clicked on it, but that's a pretty cool ad. So they have a 1.5 rating currently. Now, here's the thing. I've been covering a lot of other movies and shows. For example, the Meghan Markle show on Netflix, and that had like a 2.8 or 3-point star. The thing is that it wasn't that bad, which means that they're getting a lot of negative reviews. Basically, they're getting ranked low because not necessarily because the movie is bad, but just because of how they feel about the whole situation. Because reports are that the movie is not that bad. It will show you now in Rotten Tomatoes, which I take more seriously. I think it has more credibility as far as what the real scores are. Now, here's what's actually quite interesting about this. Number one, the IMDb rating is a 1.5. And it actually says here, our rating mechanism has detected unusual voting activity on this title. So I think it had something like 285,000 ratings, and it's a 1.5. Now, here's the other thing. It says here the IMDb rating is weighted to help keep it reliable. But in this case, the unweighted mean is also 1.5. That means that the weighted mean is going to give more weight to where it is in the ranking system. So instead of weighting, instead of giving an average of all the numbers, it's going to weight the ranking. Like in the case of Meghan Markle's show, the weighted ranking was like a 2.8, but the unweighted ranking was like a 5, which is probably closer to what the show really would be rated if people were neutral about it. The thing is that it had so many 1-star reviews that the weight, that when it was weighted, it dropped the ranking way down. In this case, the weight and the average are the same, which is quite interesting. I would have expected this to come out a lot higher. So that's the thing. Now, on the other hand, when you look at the Rotten Tomatoes, it has much better rankings than on ratings than the IMDb ratings, but these are also a little bit skewed, these numbers. So the tomato meter are critics and the popcorn meter is the general audience. Their rating system is a little bit different and it could be a little bit misleading because they actually have the more positive ranking showing right now. So they've got, it says, there's the top critics or all critics. And this is 40% are giving it a fresh or positive ranking. And top critics, which is, I guess, 56 top critic reviews, are giving it a fresh. So that's not to say, so that 29% is not like a 2.9 out of 10. The top critics are giving it a 5 out of 10, and then the all critics are giving it a 5.2 out of 10 ranking. And then as far as the popcorn meter, that is the verified audience is giving it a 3.9 out of 5. And it says here that the verified audience, the percentage of users who made a verified movie ticket purchase rating this 3.5 stars or higher, 74%, which is pretty high. That said, the entire audience is giving it a 1.5 out of 5 rating. And I guess it's 19% is of the whole audience giving it a 3.5 stars or higher. So yeah, so these scores are misleading because they're showing basically they're giving the best of each side. So instead of doing like all in all, they're giving the best of the critic and they're giving the best of the audience. I feel like you should give you should do top critics and verified audience, or do all critics and all audience. So it's interesting. I haven't looked at this enough to know if they do this consistently, like they're going to do the all critics and then the verified audience to give a balance in the reviews. Anyway, their scores are a lot higher than IMDb. And, it might be a little bit closer to what the real score should be. So yeah, quite interesting that, that they got such low reviews, but at the same time, this is the big controversy that they've been having, right? So the media coverage on this has been sharing like that it's not doing well. The movie is not doing well, with one exception. We're going to read an article now in a minute. But for the most part, the news on this has been pretty negative. Snow White box office plummets, suffers 66% drop in its second weekend. Working Man takes down Snow White. Snow White at 143 million global after second frame. A Working Man bills 30 million. So yeah, it's interesting. Box office upset, blue collar drama. A Working Man beats Snow White. And let's see some other. How much does Disney's Snow White need to gross to break even? That's interesting. Snow White, Disney, Rachel Zegler, and a toxic debate that's not going away. John Lennon's son calls Rachel Zegler a spoiled, ungrateful brat. We just read that article. Actually, no, that's a new one. Snow White poisoned by controversy at box office won't have a happy ending. Oh yeah, and then we just read about this. Snow White flagged by IMDb due to intense review bombing. Right. And so people are not even watching it and giving it a negative rating. I don't think that it's fair to give negative reviews without watching the program. And also on that, I think you should be honest. And I don't think it helps to give positive reviews when you've never watched or never used the thing either, whatever the review is, right? What if you give, it has inflated reviews and then somebody gets hurt because they see those inflated reviews? And the same on the downside. This show, I'm sure, I haven't watched it, but I'm sure it has incredible music, incredible scenery. The actors are good actors. They are good performers. So I'm sure it's an entertaining tale. I think that there's just all the other controversy that is weighing down the movie. This is interesting here from the New York Times. Snow White and the 7 Kajillion controversies. It's true. There's just so many controversies with this movie. Now, this is an article that came out in Variety last week. It says, Inside Disney's Snow White fiasco, death threats, beef with security, and a social media guru for Rachel Zegler. So remember, she was the star of West Side Story, and she was, she did a really good job. She was fairly young at the time, and she was lined up to be cast for Snow White. Now, that was back in 2021. So the movie came out 4 years later. And the thing is that right from the beginning, there was controversy with the fact that she does not have, skin as white as snow, because she's Latina. And technically, just so everybody knows, Latino or Latina or Hispanic is not a race. It is an ethnicity. I am Hispanic. I am 100% of Cuban descent. Both my parents were born in Cuba. And I am pretty white. Like, I can be white as snow. That said, when you look at it and you think about a movie that talks specifically about somebody's skin color, and then Peter Dinklage did mention the fact that you're bringing this movie back to life, talking about dwarfs. There were some, social sensibilities that needed to be taken into account before doing a movie like this, right? So right from the beginning, you've got the issue with the skin color, you got the issue with the dwarves. So those were the big controversies for making the live action. And let's be real here. Disney wanted to hire Rachel Zegler, they wanted to, and they have been taking a more liberal approach, a more progressive approach in their movies, and really going with female empowerment, which I'm all for. The thing is, when it's a remake of older classics, this is where they get into trouble. Why don't they just create a new movie or a new movie, a completely new movie, instead of remaking old movies that people have come to know and love? Just create a new movie with female empowerment, right? This was a big criticism also with the latest Indiana Jones movie, and them saying, they basically emasculated Harrison Ford, like Indiana Jones, in favor of, the female empowerment of his, I think it's his goddaughter in the movie. And so there was a lot of criticism in that. And there's nothing wrong with female empowerment. But again, when it's at the expense of either other characters in the movie or a classic traditional story or a well-known story that people already know and love, that's where you come into problem, right? And they've tried other times to modernize different stories. I mean, even West Side Story was modernized in a sense. At the same time, it also kept a lot of the traditional aspects to it. Now, here's the thing. Things really started to get heated up when, look, Disney could not have predicted back in 2021 when they cast Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot. They could not have predicted that the issue would have happened in Israel, and they could not have predicted their two stars would be on diametrically opposed views of that same issue. They could not have predicted that. That is not Disney's fault. That said, all of that definitely brought controversy. That was outside of the control of Disney. But there are some things, and we're going to talk about that at the end here, some things that Disney could do going forward that could help to protect their brand and their image, right? So Gal Gadot is Israeli. She's apparently been in the IDF. She is obviously going to have a more pro-Israel stance. Then they share the trailer of Snow White. Rachel Zegler posted that, but then also immediately posted saying free Palestine. And so she decided to leverage a social media platform for a cause that she cares about without thinking about the repercussions for Disney and for Gal Gadot. Because if she knows, which she does, because everybody knows that Gal Gadot is Israeli, why would you put out such a strong stance that could hurt your own coworker, your colleague? It just doesn't make any sense. If she wanted to do it separately, that would be a different story. But to tie the movie to her political stance or to her stance was really dumb. And on top of that, the producer flew over to her to try to get her to take it down, and she didn't do that. Let's see. What did the son of the producer, this was his statements. His name is Jonah Platt. Your dad flew to NYC to reprimand a young actress. Any words on this? Because that's creepy as hell and uncalled for. People have the right to free speech. No? Shame on your father. And then Jonah Platt said, "You really want to do this?" "Yeah, my dad, the producer of an enormous piece of Disney IP with hundreds of millions of dollars on the line, had to leave his family to fly across the country to reprimand his 20-year-old employee for dragging her personal politics into the middle of promoting the movie, for which she signed a multi-million-dollar contract to get paid and do publicity for. This is called adult responsibility and accountability. And her actions clearly hurt the film's box office. Free speech does not mean you're allowed to say whatever you want in your private employment without repercussions. Tens of thousands of people worked on that film, and she hijacked the conversation for her own immature desires at the risk of all the colleagues and crew and blue-collar workers who depend on that movie to be successful. Narcissism is not something to be coddled or encouraged." So, I don't agree with everything that he's saying, but there are some good points that he makes in this. The fact that, she signed a contract to get paid and do publicity for. She did not get paid to share her political views. And then to tie those political views to the movie, definitely completely inappropriate. I think her actions did hurt the film's box office because she could have held off on giving her views on this, or she could have done it in a different way, right? And that happened over the summer. And then it says here, 3 months later, following the presidential election, Zegler posted F Donald Trump and made Trump supporters never know peace on Instagram, which is kind of also a little bit hypocritical, frankly, because she wants peace in the Middle East, in Palestine, but then wishes that Trump supporters don't have peace. So, there's some hypocrisy there. One thing is for her not to like Donald Trump, but another thing is to wish them supporters never know peace. So there she's very public persona, is basically alienating an audience of individuals. And let's not forget that Disney has been alienating a lot of the traditional, more conservative parents, families, and by default, the kids, because of their more, I hate using the word woke, I hate that word, but those more woke, more progressive stances. And, Disney might think that they're taking a stand on these issues, but they also need to know their audience. And they don't have to endorse every single, progressive viewpoint. They don't have to do that. And so they can pick and choose the ones that they feel are necessary, right? Like, I think diversity is a good one. But again, when it's at the expense of other people, then we need to be careful, right? We need to be careful how that's portrayed. So, these are things for a corporate organization to look at and to consider. When it does affect the bottom line, right? That's where we need to look at the strategy and see, where did we go wrong? How can we work toward it? Like Rachel Zegler is in alignment with Disney politics, I'm sure. And although Rachel Zegler maybe was not sharing her opinions publicly or that publicly at the time when she got cast, she's definitely in alignment with the political landscape that Disney seems to be sharing. So it's not like she's out of alignment there, but as an organization, as a brand, you need to make sure that your views are in alignment with your audience's views. And there definitely seems to be a disconnect, and it's been happening for years. Maybe this is a wake-up call for Disney, that swinging the pendulum to the other side in trying to be super progressive and catering to one specific audience was not necessarily the best idea. Again, you can be a champion for certain causes and certain views, but when that is alienating your audience or a large part of your audience, that's when we need to take a step back and decide, what do we really stand for, and what is our non-negotiable, right? So it says here, after a back and forth, Platt made the case again to Zegler. After a back and forth, she began working with the social media guru paid for by Disney to vet any posts before the film's March 21 bow. Disney declined comment. Zegler did not respond to a request for comment. Now that the film's dismal opening weekend, 87 million worldwide, is in the rearview mirror, Burbank brass are evaluating what went wrong. To put Snow White's global box office haul into perspective, it's about $34 million less than Warner Brothers' Joker Folie à in October, but with a bigger budget by 70 million. And this, this had really bad reviews to begin with. That Joker movie that Lady Gaga was in didn't really have good reviews, and it was a very dark movie. Another thing that was interesting is that none of the premieres had open press invited. So they were kept really small. They had photographers. There are some things that I think they could have done differently there. Instead of inviting press, maybe they could have done something different, or they could have invited some friendlies. So let's see. It says here, you can't say that a live action remake of the most iconic film in the vault that cost $207 million has been reshot multiple times, opening to $50 million, and is okay. The math does not work. That movie should be a billion-dollar movie, said an executive at a rival studio when the film was tracking for a $45 million to $55 million domestic opening. It ended up at below even the low-end figure at $43 million. Disney Zegler standoffs underscore the challenge Hollywood studios face as they attempt to rein in stars who court controversy on social media. For her part, Gadot kept her comments on geopolitics limited to offering support for the civilian hostages taken during the October 7th Hamas attack and did not mix that message with the promotion of the film. And this also would make sense considering she is Israeli, that it feels like if she would be sharing empathy with people from her country. Oh, right. And let's not forget that she criticized the original 1937 Snow White, noting that the prince literally stalks the heroine. One top agent says that was a moment that Disney allowed Zegler to control the narrative. The first time she shoots her mouth off, you nip it in the bud. Instead, the studio said nothing and purists began to revolt. And as time went on, Disney became increasingly loath to weigh in on anyone's speech, considering that the studio was sued in 2024 by actress Gina Carano, who claimed she was fired from The Mandalorian for voicing her opinions on hot-button issues. They say all press is good press, but in Snow White's case, they were unabashedly wrong, says box office analyst Jeff Bach. Too much negative controversy surrounded this film for years, and it didn't help that the reviews were subpar, likely rendering this latest live-action adventure to D+ for many potential ticket buyers. A possible saving grace? A feeble marketplace where Snow White could stay a while, as many family films have, despite the lackluster debut. So this is also interesting. This is probably the only article that I've seen, or one of the only articles that I've seen, that actually doesn't credit Rachel Zegler with, the whole blame for the movie. This is Where is the Buzz? This is showing up on Yahoo Entertainment. And it's definitely an opinion piece, but I do think it brings up some really good points, namely that she did give a really good performance. She's a great singer. She does have a wonderful presence, and that she at least delivered on what she was hired for, which was to be an actor, to be a singer, and to perform. And she did that. Now, she was not hired to give her political opinions or to decide that to the movie in any way, or obviously not to be controversial. But I do think that it does bring up some good points there. It says here, Rachel Zegler's performance is the film's brightest spot. A reflection on the larger issue. The backlash against Rachel Zegler is not just about Snow White. It is a reflection of a larger pattern in Hollywood where female leads, particularly those who speak out on social issues, face disproportionate criticism. The industry has seen this happen before with actors like Brie Larson and Daisy Ridley, both of whom face similar treatment after starring in major franchises. What makes the situation particularly frustrating is that Zegler delivered exactly what was expected of her, a stellar performance. She brought emotion, talent, and a fresh perspective to a character loved by generations. Yet instead of celebrating that, the conversation has been dominated by external factors. This raises an important question. Why do audiences and media narratives so often shift blame onto the actors rather than looking at the broader industry decisions that shape a film's success or failure? And that's why I am so against the IMDb ratings, because even in the case of Megan, the Megan show, which I thought would probably get about a 5, it was okay. It had some good, really good spots. And then, the show itself was like, I would give it a 5. This movie, with the exception of, I don't know how the CGI magical creatures look, but by all accounts, it seems like it should get a really good review just based on the creative value of the movie itself. Probably at least a 7.5, right? Maybe even an 8 or above. So the fact that people are giving it such low reviews, even though she performs really well and the show seems to have, or the movie seems to have good value, production value, musical value and creative value. I think what happened is that this was not an original movie. If it had been an original movie, it would have been different. But because it was a remake and then a live action remake at that, then there was the comparison factor. And that's probably another reason why people want to give it such low marks. They're like, hey, the original was perfect on its own. Why are you going to remake it and then make it into something different? Rachel Zegler gave the film its most compelling element, her talent. The backlash against her says more about the state of online discord and industry politics than it does about her ability to lead a film. The real question remains, will Hollywood and its audiences learn from this pattern, or will another actor soon find themselves in the same position? Okay, so then the question remains, what can Disney do, right? Going forward, what can Disney do to counter all of this negative publicity, this PR nightmare that they've been experiencing with the Snow White film? So the first thing I would say is for them to take a step back and review the strategy. What do they really stand for? What they really stand for, is that aligned with their audience? And if it's not, then maybe if they want to be a little more progressive, maybe it's doing it in a way little by little, or maybe they stand by 1 or 2 progressive values instead of trying to do all of them. See what's working, what is the audience responding to, and then make sure to incorporate that. But if you're going to go 180, it's going to alienate your audience. So look at what they stand for. How is it reflected in the audience? And review that strategy and see, is this the direction that Disney wants to go? Number 2, as far as this movie, one big mistake I think that they made is that they didn't invite any media. They could have invited their friendlies. They could have invited the media that they knew was going to cover the story positively. They should have invited influencers, because influencers generally are going to side with, especially in a premiere like this, they're going to side with the brand and they're really going to highlight. They're not going to cover, maybe they might mention in passing some of the controversies, but they could have done some research and found some really influential people that were already covering Snow White, were excited for Snow White, and invited them, and even some micro influencers, to talk about it, to experience it, and even to maybe even interview the stars. So they would have gotten that more organic. You see, they didn't want to invite the press, but then they should have invited some of those influencers to get more of that organic feel. They could have also done a campaign where they got the, regular moviegoers and families invested in the movie. They were too worried about the negative backlash, but they didn't take advantage of the organic buzz that the movie was going to get, right? People feeling excited about the movie. I didn't see any of that. I just saw the negative media, and maybe that's why the media were invited, because they were already talking negatively about it. But that's fine. Be creative, try something different, try something outside of the box, try to make it organic. There is a large audience that still wanted to go to the movie. It's not like nobody wanted to go. What was it? Opening weekend, they still had $43 million worth of ticket sales. So that is something. The third thing is they really need to review how online discourse is going to affect their movies going forward. This is the year that publicity is really affecting celebrities. People are not taking it anymore, meaning the general public is calling out celebrities, is calling out corporations. And this has been happening for a while. And I feel like it's finally reached that fever pitch and people are just not taking it anymore. We saw it with Blake Lively in the Justin Baldoni situation, the lawsuits there. And it's affected, in the case of Blake Lively, it affected her other movies. Had nothing to do with the It Ends With Us movies. And so movies and the studios and other people involved are probably going to need to include in their contracts. There's a morality clauses, there's promotional clauses, being really specific on what can and can't be said during the promotions of the movies. And another thing is that I think that this situation with Snow White and Blake Lively really highlights the fact that when there is a bad apple, it's okay to cut them loose. They might have made more money, or maybe it wouldn't have cost them so much if they would have let go of the bad apple, right? In the case Blake Lively, in the case of It Ends With Us, Rachel Zegler, in the case of Snow White, and hired the right people, right? Maybe at one point they thought Blake Lively in the case of It Ends With Us and Rachel Zegler in the case of Snow White were the right fit. But when they realized that it wasn't a right fit, it's okay to cut them loose. Blake Lively actually was cut loose from a movie. Somehow there was a discrepancy somehow with one of the producers or something, and she was cut loose from the movie and somebody else was hired in her place. Probably the best decision they could have made. And I'm sure they're looking back on that and saying, thank the Lord that we made that decision, because who knows what type of drama we would have gotten if we would have kept Blake as the lead or whatever her role was in that movie. And back to that point about making sure that the person is the right fit. Instead of caring about their star power, instead of caring about what they think the value of that actor is going to be, they need to look at it more holistically and also see how that actor has behaved in the past, what potential, almost like a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, right? Like maybe they need to do SWOT analysis on these major actors and see if there's any potential threats that could be unearthed during this process. Like, for example, even though Ryan Reynolds is the face of Deadpool, which is a rated R movie, so not for kids, the fact that he had his 7-year-old daughter saying all of these obscenities during the movie, very inappropriate, not family friendly, right? Like that might affect Disney, that might affect other Marvel movies or Disney movies. And so these are things that now these studios need to look at. What are the potential threats of the actors? What are the weaknesses of these different actors? Because for the most part, we're looking at the strengths and the opportunities, but they're not looking at the W and the T. And a SWOT analysis is what we do in marketing and communications. So maybe they're going to need to do more of an analysis for each of the actors. Instead of saying they like this person for the role, they're going to have to look at it more holistically. So what do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you like this video, if you learned something new, please hit the thumbs up. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, I'd appreciate it if you do. I cover tips and strategies to help you grow your visibility, brand identity, publicity, and also I cover the VisibiliTEA, celebrities, influencers, and pop culture from a PR, branding, image management, reputation management standpoint, and cover do's and don'ts, learning lessons, and takeaways. And if you like this video, you may also like these videos as well. And with that, have a blessed rest of your day. Bye for now.